Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Premier Pundits live podcast. It's a quick turnaround, folks. Another disastrous game week for the one-eyed king. I'm not really sure what's going on. I'm teetering on the edge. I'm in a worse predicament than Mikel Arteta at this rate. I could be out the door. I'm odds-on favourite to walk the plank before the festive season. But I'm almost positive my esteemed co-host must have had a better game week than me. Mr. McKenna, how are you and how did your team do this week?
You come in with such positivity for me, Ben, but honestly, it's not been great. I wanted, I was going to use my soundboard that I've got here to put on a sad bit of music, but then I was in such a despondent mood that I didn't even pre-program a sad song in there. So, 53 points from my wildcard team. Now, maybe a week ago, that would have been a good one. But what compounds the sadness, first of all, a red arrow. Second of all, I had 6 and 7 points on my bench. A 6-pointer from Diaz, 7 points from Romeu. It wasn't great. And just nothing seemed to happen right this week in terms of expected data trends. Everton, Chelsea, what the hell happened there? Who saw that? Callum Wilson blanking against West Brom, but Geordie Joe doing his bit once again. So maybe maybe I should have trusted in the Geordie Joe there. And just lots of crazy occurrences. Liverpool drawing with Fulham. I mean, these are the sort of things that kind of sunk my game week, which were it almost in many ways. A lot of people kind of thought, that's a done and dusted game. Liverpool are going to absolutely trounce Fulham. Salah's the greatest captain ever this game week, and Robertson will definitely get a clean sheet. None of it happened. So, game week 12 was not a nice one. So, like I said, after the wild card as well, it wasn't great.
But what you need to remember, Jason, the wild card is not just for Christmas.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you keep look after you into the new year. I can assure you. I'm sure a man with your foresight and your planning and your underpinning knowledge on the data and the stats. I'm sure you're going to come good in the short to medium term. Think positive, my friend. Somebody told me if you keep on thinking positive, then it will happen.
I like it.
I'm looking at another camera. My camera has went off.
Yeah.
If anybody's watching and they don't understand what's going on, we've tried a new concept tonight. We were actually recording on 2 separate devices. HotMic is still live and is going swimmingly as per usual. But am I right in assuming that Zoom has now went off, Jason? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct there. I think I figured out what the problem is. So for Thursday's show, that will be sorted out for definite. But yes, so let's move it on to the talking points of this preview of Game Week 13, because for everybody, this is the important thing. It is tomorrow. You've got to get your team ready and raring by about 4:30, because obviously with the new times and everything, this is a very short game week period. And just the advice on this
is get your shit together.
Exactly. Keep an eye on these timings as well, because this catches some people out. I don't think I'll be doing any sorts of transfers this game week, but you might have the Jota injury to deal with, or even you might be that crazy and have Tashimkas in your team from Liverpool for some absolute weird reason. But this is all because tomorrow is the big game, 15th of December. It's big. These fixtures are really tightly put together. And this is part of the reason why I pulled my wild card as well, is because I knew some of these players might be rested, might be given time off, because it is so tight together, coupled with COVID. So we're going to talk through a few of these points. But as always, what really assists us with these times is also knowing who's injured, who's worried, who might be rested. And Ben, this is where you come in with your expertise on many things with football, but obviously injuries is your forte. Who is looking kind of likely for maybe a rest or maybe an injury doubt? And I think one of the big ones, actually, for some reason, he's popular, possibly a knee-jerk pick, but a pick nonetheless, James Maddison. Maybe we should start with him and then move on to any others that you know about.
Well, we have had a number of press conferences on Monday, so we've got a little bit of insight into how those teams maybe will set up and who's in and who's out. I'll touch upon the James Maddison first. Of course, he was a doubt heading into game week 12, missed the Europa League tie against AEK Athens, and that was due to what Brendan Rodgers described as a rumbling in his knee. I'm not really sure what a rumbling. I mean, that's not a technical medical term. Reading between the lines, I think it was just more of one of those precautionary measures. Maddison didn't train much at all, only had a couple of sessions under his belt. And, was he ever likely to miss out on Sunday night? I'm not so sure. But we've seen what happened. He came into the game, and he had a bit of a worldie there with a couple of goals. And people sort of stand up and take note when anybody bangs a couple. And then, you're looking at Maddison and you're looking at Vardy with that. Heading into this period, like I say, it's always a slight concern. I mean, the majority of players at this point in the season, everybody's carrying knocks and niggles, and you're very rarely getting players who are going out there at 100%. It's about pain management. It's about, risk and reward, and understanding, managers to pick those fixtures and when they can feel that maybe they can afford to rest players, and when they feel they might need to throw them in there. So that's why, and we've stressed this for a number of weeks now, having a deep bench to try and soften any blow for any sort of last-minute injury or that rotation. I mean, Leicester, home game against Everton, after Saturday's result, you've got to stand up and look at Everton, and they've been shone in a slightly different light because they haven't been in great form. But that win at the weekend and how they went about that win, sort of tactically by Carlo Ancelotti, they'll be arriving at the King Power full of confidence. So maybe when you see that as a good, easy 3 points on the board for Leicester, that's potentially, it's a tough game. So, I would think Brendan Rodgers wants to put all these big guns, all these high status players out in that one. And as far as I'm concerned, James Maddison should be in that starting 11.
And maybe some other injury concerns. Obviously, Mikel Antonio, he's one that I've had my eye on for a long old while, but of course I'm very tempered with my interest because I know how injury prone he is. But is there any kind of update on him and possibly Ross Barkley as well? Because Aston Villa seem to do really, really well with Barkley in the side, helping launching those attacks. Is he going to be one that we might be seeing over the Christmas period, or will he have his minutes managed because of that little injury that he had?
I would certainly think, we'll touch upon Ross Barkley first. Dean Smith was fairly confident that the Chelsea loanee could be back sometime this week. Whether it's for Thursday night's game against Burnley, we're not too sure. If it is, it's likely to be from the bench. Otherwise, we would expect to see Barkley in the squad on Sunday. And again, with soft tissue muscle, hamstring injuries, they're ones that you've got to be careful of during this period, especially around fatigue. And those types of injuries have high reoccurrence rates. So within the first month of a player returning to play with those types of injuries, they have a high number of setbacks. So that's why they need to be managed so carefully. So Ross Barkley may be one that, mightn't start every game, or certainly won't play 90 minutes. Elsewhere, you touched on Mikel Antonio. Again, he's going to be there or thereabouts, another hamstrung player. But what I would say with regards to West Ham and also David Moyes, apart from the fact that we've touched upon Sebastian Haller and how shocking his performance was the other night, West Ham still got the result. And arguably, I mean, towards the end of the game, Haller's overhead kick, pulled off it. It was a good save by Meslier. Could have got his goal. And, all of these things are mean that David Moyes doesn't have to rush Antonio back. Because we've already seen a recurrence for Antonio. So, you've got to be very, very wary of that, given his historical injury problems. So he won't be far away from the squad, but I wouldn't expect him to come straight back into the starting lineup. The mistake that Moyes made, first time around by dropping Haller, I think he's going to keep faith with Haller, and then he will gradually integrate Antonio to build up his minutes. But elsewhere from today, some of the other major talking points, a lot of people asking about Tariq Lamptey. He was a surprise omission from the squad at Leicester on Sunday night. That was reported as a minor hamstring issue, a little bit of tightness in the muscle. Good news is that he has trained today. Now, of course, we'll want to see if there's any reaction there tomorrow. If there's not, then, Lamptey along with Webster and Lallana could all be in that Brighton squad to give them a little bit of a boost. Manchester City, Sergio Aguero. Again, it seems to be the season of the hamstring. Scores in the Champions League. People were even suggesting that he may start in the Manchester derby. That was never going to be the case because Pep had already ruled him out, saying, look, it's a step-by-step process. We'll agree. Come Saturday night, he was omitted from the squad altogether. Did not make the 18. However, that was not injury-related. He had a touch of illness, a little bit of gastroenteritis. And he has trained on Monday. So, I wouldn't expect Sergio to start, but I fully expect him to be in the Manchester City match day 18.
What's funny for me is when I was young, the word hamstring. Well, whenever people used to mention hamstring injuries, I imagine just like people had in their leg just a string of ham, that you cut off the bone, and just this very thin one. And then because of my mental image, I just thought, oh, well, no wonder people have such hamstring injuries, because it must be just a thin little string of ham. But it's not out of the ordinary now because of the high intensity runs and everything, the hamstring injuries. The two more that I wanted to ask about quickly before we get into the main talking points is Gareth Bale and Matip. Now, Gareth Bale, I don't know if he's important to the Tottenham side. They seem to be doing well without him. But he was kind of a differential that a lot of people had their eyes on in terms of FPL. We know the quality of him, but he just hasn't hit the ground running at Tottenham yet. Will he be featuring anytime soon with this mystery illness?
It's the expectation is that Gareth will return to the squad. Like I say, it was an illness. It wasn't COVID related or anything like that. So just a touch of cold, nothing too sinister, nothing really underlying. Let's not forget that Gareth hasn't played a lot of first team competitive football before his arrival in this country. Blighted with injury. Found himself on the peripherals of that Real Madrid squad for whatever reason. So almost you've got to go through this pre-season program. You've got to build yourself up anyway. But then he's coming back into the Premier League, and Gareth Bale isn't the same young, fresh, energetic sort of wing back that he was when he left. He's a player who's matured in years. His body takes a little bit longer to recover. It takes a little bit longer to adapt. He's been used to this game in La Liga. Yes, they have their explosive spurts, and those moments of high intensity runs. But, there's nothing quite like the Premier League. And the worst thing you could do with Gareth, again, given his problem, is, too much too soon. Because, like I say, he's liable to have a setback, and that could put him out for however long. I think the squad during this period, it's integral. That being able to rotate, rest, manage minutes, manage load. That's if the managers can more or less keep a strong nucleus of 13, 14, 15 players throughout this period, you'll tend to find that, those are the teams that are doing best.
And the final one is Joel Matip. Liverpool have their problems this season, with all sorts of injuries. And I will actually get into some very interesting facts about their defence a little bit later on. But with him, I think we both were unsurprised that Joel Matip would be injured during this period. But the point is from what I've read, but I'm sure you can open out a little bit more, Klopp, explain that it was just a back injury, that it doesn't seem to be a long-term thing. Are they going to risk his fitness for this next game against Tottenham because it's so important, or will he not be featuring?
Based on the information to hand, yes, it's painful, it's back spasm. Yes, it's causing minor problems, but it's a type of injury that if it can be loosened off, if it can be managed, then he can go out and play, and he would. It's not a type of problem that can be exacerbated. It's not like a tear in the muscle. It's not going to, you're not going to risk 1 week to possibly 6 weeks. It's about, again, that risk and reward strategy, and I'm fairly confident, given the fact that Liverpool have quite a horrendous injury problem at the moment, that Matip will be risked from the start. And it's about, can he get through that game? They will be working intensively on him to try and loosen the muscles in and around, at that lower back area, to patch him up and get him out there. But of course, anybody who's not on the game, who's not at 100% against the likes of Harry Kane and Heung-min Son, well, then potentially, you're on there. You could be on the back end of a big beating off those two on given form.
Yeah, this is the worrying thing, and this is why I want to talk about Liverpool in a little bit. But we're going to start off with the talking points, and for copyright reasons, I won't put the song in. But of course, we're going to have to talk about Lord of the Ings, Return of the Ing. This has been a great return for Mr. Ings. He's looked great, back to himself. Unlucky not to get a goal this weekend, and especially looking at his XG, the second highest XG achiever this game week, only behind Cavallero, and second most shots in the box alongside Maddison. He's looking good already. Exciting stuff. I'm happy, hopefully, to get him into my team soon. It'll be facilitated, obviously, once I get rid of Wilson. And people will go, oh, well, Southampton have got a few difficult fixtures coming up on the horizon with maybe Man City, West Ham, Liverpool. But it doesn't matter with Ings. He scores against anybody, everybody. He's so damn good. He's one of those people that you can own for the season long. The other thing that people will probably say is, well, I've got rid of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but in my opinion, I think Southampton are probably better going forward. They seem to be more settled than Everton. And I think as well, my opinion on this is that the way that Southampton play probably protects them more. So they've got a system in place, whereas I think Ancelotti, we know how pragmatic he is, but we also know how many problems Everton have with injuries. They had to play two centre-backs as full-backs this weekend. It's not great stuff there. They don't have the creativity of Digne. And yes, DCL, I think, will keep providing maybe every week or every other week with maybe an assist here and there. But then again, he can't keep producing if the team can't give him stuff to produce. We've seen this with Aubameyang. As good as Calvert-Lewin is, as good as Aubameyang is, there's a certain limit, especially when your team isn't playing well. Whereas Southampton are on fine form. They're massively overperforming XG, so we will see kind of return back. But also that they were overperforming when Ings wasn't in the side. We'll see what they can do with Ings in the side. So I think he's a great one for people to bring into their teams. And Ben, your template buster, you've got him in already, haven't you?
I did. I wasn't so sure whether I would have pulled the trigger ahead of game week 12 or game week 13, but obviously we commentated on the game from round 11 when Ings came off the bench, and it looked as if he hadn't actually been away. He obviously got the penalty to win the game. and I was really impressed. I always had it in my mind that I wanted to bring Danny Ings back into the side. And there was one or two issues that I had going on. I had carried 2 transferred over. So I had an opportunity to do so. And of course, it was Shea Adams, the player that made way. And once you seen the opening goal on at the weekend there, I sort of, you start to question, is it going to be one of those game weeks? It was one of those game weeks, but the long term over the next, over this festive period, I would fully expect Danny Ings to come out on top in that little duel. Looking great. And again, he's produced that on his first start since undergoing knee surgery. So the expectation is that he can only get better. He can only get sharper. Of course, it means he's had this injury, so he's had his little rest period ahead of these upcoming fixtures. So he might be a player that Ralph Hasenhüttl actually looks at and saying, well, you've had a month out, so there's no need to really sort of rest or rotate you in any way, shape, or form. And the rotation may come in the form of Shea Adams, which would be good for Danny Ings owners.
Well, this is the thing as well. When we did your wildcard team, the thing that I said to you was Shea Adams is in your team because he's producing good data, but also he's covering that Ings spot. Logically, you will get Ings in once he's fit. That's why I kind of suggested him to you. And I think it's totally right. Ings, everything is going for him. He's a bit like Callum Wilson. He's had rest, but much longer than Callum Wilson. And he'll be going into this period in a buoyant Southampton side. This is one of their best Premier League performances for many, many years. They got the psychology on their side. Yes, there's a smattering of tough fixtures in there, but I'd even contextualise it. The Arsenal game is flagged as a fairly difficult one, but look at how badly they did against Burnley. Then they've got Man City, Fulham, West Ham, Liverpool and Leeds in the next 6 games. And I'd say, Liverpool and City are always difficult games, but the other ones are scoreable, the other ones are winnable, and even the Man City and Liverpool games, they're both at home. And, these Man City, Liverpool sides haven't been the juggernauts that they've been in previous seasons. I wouldn't fancy betting against Ings, the way that he's restarted. So I think it's a good shout there, Ben.
I mean, look, I think Danny Ings, Southampton in particular, will go into these games full of confidence. They won't be frightened of anybody at the moment in this Premier League. Danny Ings, 6 goals, 3 assists in his 9 Premier League starts, 3-3 against Arsenal while playing at Southampton. Look, Ralph Hasenhüttl spoke on Monday afternoon, and one of the first questions you always get is, can you give us a team news? What you said? He goes, look, do you think anybody's injured? Because they're not. Everybody's telling me that they want to play and they want to be involved. And psychologically, we look at one of the things that sticks in mind was when Leicester won the Premier League. Those teams inherently who are doing well, who are on good runs, tend not to have any injuries. The players do not want to lose their place within that team. They will, carry on and play through little minor knocks and niggles and issues where maybe on other occasions, they would take a step back. They would maybe put their hands up and say, well, look, I'm not 100%. But when teams are playing like this and everybody's, so excited and wants to be on that pitch, then everybody's putting a hand up and everybody's going hell for leather in training, and that's reflected on the pitches. And yeah, look, I've said it, since the beginning of Project Restart, and I'll continue saying it. I'll continue beating that Southampton drum because I am sweet on them. The only criticism that I've got is for myself and the fact that I think I've benched Ryan Bertrand for 3 of his clean sheets this season.
No.
Which has been an absolute... So I've had a right stinker when it comes to Ryan Bertrand.
No. I mean, the positive thing as well is the history of Ings. Since Project Restart, he's never blanked in consecutive game weeks. He's always either blanked and then scored the next game week. And this season, the only time that he's blanked is obviously those 3 games when he was injured, or there's 2 other occasions. This is in the Crystal Palace game, and the second one was the West Brom game. Those are the 2 blanks that he's had. He doesn't blank. He's so consistent. He scores against anybody and everybody. It's a really good one to have in your team. Now, we've mentioned that this team, obviously with James Maddison, Leicester, a lot of people are liking them at the moment, but I'm still not convinced. I don't know if you've been watching them, Ben, but at times they're a little bit lethargic, but at other times they play the great football that they're capable of. But kind of looking at their data, the side haven't created a lot of chances, but then they have the 4th best XG over the last 6 matches. But then you have to factor in penalties. There's so much I don't know, things that make me feel uneasy about trusting their attacking assets. The only one that I would seriously consider is Vardy, but you and I have both echoed many, many times that he's a hard one to have in your team unless you can kind of go, oh, they've got good run of fixtures and great data, great form. And I just don't see that. The next 6 fixtures, the second worst in the Premier League. Their data has not been great this season. Over the course of the season so far, the team only have a slightly better non-penalty XG than Arsenal, buoyed by penalties in their overall XG. That really, really buoyed indeed. And also their 83 chances created this season is the 3rd worst in total. They've obviously had quite a good run in the last 6. They defeated Man City earlier on in the season, but I think some of these results, looking at XG, looking at the quality of chances, they've been very, very lucky. I mean, Jamie Vardy scored from his only big chance yesterday. I'm not sure that they've turned the corner as a team that I can trust in. They're still not producing the attractive numbers that it takes for me to invest in a player. And I also look at their growing list of absences and injuries. I mean, Johnny Evans is now not going to be there the next game. That adds extra strain, extra worry, and their injury list to key players just really worries me. But I don't know, Ben, am I focusing too much? I mean, yes, the next 6 fixtures are bad, but Jamie Vardy scores against anybody and everybody, and there's no doubt he's in good form. Should I be changing my mind on Jamie?
I looked at Jamie Vardy actually ahead of this game week and seen his ownership was through the roof, and that instantly put me off anyway. I think it was in and around 29%. I didn't suspect that it would be quite as high as that. Whether I would give it some serious consideration anyway, I'm not so sure. I'm with you. If Leicester had lost or even drawn at home to Brighton on Sunday evening, it would have come at absolutely as no surprise whatsoever. Leicester are we've seen what they've done at Manchester City, and then they followed up with a home defeat to West Ham. They recently lost to Fulham 2-1. You just don't really know what you're going to get with them. You wouldn't put your house on Leicester winning a game. But Jamie Vardy's Jamie Vardy, and he will continue to do what he does, which on paper and statistically is very little. But the one thing that counts is that goals column, and you know that Brendan Rodgers loves him, so he's going to start more often than not. He's going to get 90 minutes, and he is a 90-minute player. He will keep going right until the very end. I did hear 1 or 2 comments from Rodgers in the build-up to the European game when he was talking about the striker's fitness and little niggles that he is carrying, and how he might have to be managed in and around certain games. So that is one to watch. If I do recall correctly, I think Jamie Vardy actually missed a game over the last festive period, but that coincided with the birth of his son or daughter. But it was almost like, well, would he have played anyway type of scenario. I think it was between the Christmas and the New Year. So he was given those extra days off, and it wouldn't surprise me again if that sort of thing was to happen. I think Brendan Rodgers will look at those fixtures, and we used to hate Newcastle. Rafa Benitez used to have his team, his starting 11 picked out for the next 6 games, and regardless of unless it was an injury or a suspension, that was the team. Regardless of how you played, this is what we're going to go with, because within the training, within the load management, within however he's seen these players and the data that they were producing, that's how he wanted to keep his squad fresh and minimise those injuries and setbacks. So managers will probably have one eye on certain fixtures where they feel as if they can maybe rest one or two, maybe key members of the squad.
Yeah, this is the thing for me. I think there is a slight risk because of his age. Let's be realistic. He does seem like a Peter Pan footballer that he goes on forever and ever. But there's also the realism that he is getting older. There is a chance that he'll be rested. But even so, it's just the data aspect for me. Maybe I'm a little bit blinkered by that. But, the fact that shots in the box over the last 6 weeks is less than Crystal Palace and Wolves. It's about mid-table. Chances created is less than West Brom. You look at big chances created, and the side are near the bottom of the table, less than Crystal Palace. Their expected goals are the highest over the last 6 game weeks, and they've got the 4th best non-penalty XG. But then I just cite the fact that they've had quite a lot of penalties. And the non-penalty, non-XG penalties obviously quite high as well, which shows that they are getting a few shots that are of high quality, but they just don't seem to be doing a lot. But then maybe they're just highly efficient. Maybe they're like a well put together Mercedes engine, and that they're just doing very well. And I'll be keeping a close eye, because I always like Vardy. And there's these certain times, he's a bit like Heung-min Son. You have to know almost prophetically when to own him. And I just don't feel it's right at the moment. The winter time, with the increased incidence of injury, I think he won't be risked too much. I think maybe post-Christmas time might be a better time with some better games. There's a lot more greens going on from maybe the 16th of January onwards. That would probably be a little bit better. And I don't know, less load on him. That's my kind of thought with him. But let's talk about one of the players that I had or still have in my wildcard team, Callum Wilson. Now, did you catch this game of Newcastle, Ben?
I caught a little bit of it. I caught the beginning and I caught the end. And I missed out the big chunk in the middle, the important stuff. But after 19 seconds, how can it possibly get any better than that? I should have just shut down at that point. Once we opened that scoring, once Jody Joe laid it on a plate for Miggy, then you thought that the gates were going to open and it was going to be a landslide. Never quite happened. But would we have took 3 points? Heading into that game, knowing that what went on behind the scenes with the squad decimated by COVID, of course we would. So, fair play to the players and Steve Bruce for grinding that one out, and obviously a great header from Dwight Gale.
Yeah. But all those players that you mentioned there are not called Callum Wilson. And this is my problem. For me watching the match, it was so weird. Wilson was playing almost the Joe Linton role, which I expect. Joe Linton is great kind of physical second striker. And I think this is why Newcastle have been a little bit better in attack this season, because Joe Linton has been there to facilitate Wilson. But for some reason in this game, and maybe the last few games as well, Wilson was the facilitator for Joe Linton and Miguel Almiron. He was more of helping those players. And it was very odd for me, but also very irritating, because he only had 4 penalty area touches, no shots all game, no XG generated. I mean, this isn't good enough for my 6.6 striker that I've just invested in. And then I looked at the data over the last few weeks, and we joked about GW13, but his data over the last few weeks has actually been much better than Wilson's. And maybe, when I was joking and saying, he's had good data, maybe I should have just put my money where my mouth is and actually gone with GW13, because in the last 4 game weeks, he's had more shots than Wilson, 7 to Wilson's 0 shots. I mean, this isn't good enough. More shots in the box, and a higher XGI than Wilson. I hope they switch back to the usual ways, but this is FPL Troll Elite Wilson. We know from previous years how much Wilson likes to troll. So I don't know. This is actually genuinely worrying me. GW13, I don't think he's going to be a mega pick, but to the same extent over these next couple of games, and that was the window that I set out, was just 3 games to own Wilson, unless he did amazing stuff. And already I'm kind of regretting that decision, because actually looking at it, he's not even the best player in Newcastle's attack at the moment. So yeah, what are you thinking on that one, Ben?
I'm with you on Wilson. I think he was a wild card pick, or he was in and around my squad. I brought him in, and I think he got a week or 2 weeks in my team before he picked up the hamstring injury, and then I got rid. And then I watched Newcastle down at Selhurst Park, and obviously I didn't have Callum Wilson. And for 89 minutes, I was happy I didn't have Callum Wilson. It was exactly what you come to expect from Steve Bruce in Newcastle, and even maybe Roy Hodgson and Palace. A dour game with very few chances, and then we catch 2 goals on the break. Wilson gets a goal, walks away with 3 bonus points, and you're already in your head. You're thinking, "Oh, should I have got rid of him? Should I bring him back in?" And then we obviously see what happened again this weekend in a match where you maybe would expect Newcastle to possibly hit 3 or 4. But we've heard Steve Bruce. He's come out and he's already said it was great performance from Callum Wilson. It's not the type of performance that we've been used to from him. It's great to see him in these different positions, forming more of link-up play, getting involved in different positions, and maybe sharing those goal-scoring opportunities and bringing a team. And Bruce was saying, "Look, I love that. I love his work rate and the effort that he's putting in to support the team." And so maybe that's something that they've been working on as well. Given the limitations that we have within our squad through illness and injury, maybe Callum Wilson's been asked to do a slightly different role. Miguel Almiron hasn't been happy with his bit part role, and also where he's been asked to play. His agent has already come out and he's started to stoke the fire. We have a transfer window coming up, but he's been thrown in there up front as well. So it could be that he's looking at thinking, interchange between GW13, Miguel Almiron, and also Callum Wilson as well. That you can't rule it out. So it just keeps, I suppose, opposition managers on their toes, and it gives them something else to think about. Because maybe heading into last weekend's game, you would say, well, if you can nullify Wilson, then you're pretty much going to nullify Newcastle, because where are the goals coming from, really? And so it could be an astute move from Steve Bruce.
Well, the other thing coming up next game week is obviously Leeds and Newcastle playing. And Leeds, I think, have the worst defensive record for set pieces. And we know how good GW13 is in the air. So this is another thing that maybe I should have factored in with my transfer. But my logical thinking was Wilson surely is going to be at the centre point of that Leeds attack. We know that Leeds have done well defensively recently, but I still think that they're leaky. I still think that the way that they play, and also the way that Newcastle play, I think on that counter, absorbing that Leeds pressure and then, coming back really quickly could do well. But we'll see. But it's a genuine worry, and maybe this 3 game week punt isn't going to pay off. But there wasn't many other strikers around that price point that I was thinking I'll get in. There's obviously Shea Adams, and he scored this game week, and he's looking great. But if I was going to get him, I'd get Ings because I think he's a little bit more expensive. I still like Ollie Watkins, and I still think he's doing great. But I just prefer the fixtures, and maybe I focused a bit too much on fixtures. But the burning Crystal Palace games that Aston Villa have, I think, those two defences are quite good. It's the West Brom one in there that Aston Villa might do well against them in. But it seemed like a fairly fun choice as well, but I'm not feeling fun at the moment at all. So let's move it on to Liverpool, who've caused a massive irritation this week. As mentioned, as a Robertson owner, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I did question a little bit. Maybe I was being a bit biased as a Robertson owner, but I don't know if that Fulham goal should have been given because somebody pushed Salah in the build-up. I don't know if you have an opinion on that one, Ben, but overall, I think Salah did silence their doubters. As always, he gets the goal, he got some bonus points, or just one single one, but even that is still good. Double-digit haul if you captained him. But the poor performance against Fulham has continued this inability of Liverpool to win on the road, and I've got some data that actually causes me real concern for it. But just on the initial kind of look there, what is happening at Liverpool, Ben, with defensive performances in these games?
Look, you cannot underestimate the impact of having so many players sidelined, key members of the squad missing. I was asked a question earlier on in the week. Earlier on in the week, it's Monday. It must be back end of last week. Can Liverpool cope without the loss? With the loss of Diogo Jota? In quite, in very simplistic terms, yes. Is Jota considered, a first choice player? Is he an automatic choice in Jurgen Klopp's starting 11? Probably not. Given even with his great form, we've seen him coming in Europe and then dropping down to the bench. And he's always a player that you would think, despite the form of Roberto Firmino, which of the three, has been the main player to sort of dip between his usual exceptional levels. Even then, Jurgen Klopp has kept faith with Roberto Firmino. So, can they cope without him? Of course they can. But what you will struggle with is this cumulative effect of having so many players out, because it has such a big knock-on, of what you can do. And again, we go back to managing load and rotation. Now you would look at maybe Jordan Henderson, a player who's been hampered throughout the season, really, and back end of last season, little niggling groin problems, knee injuries. He would be a player that you would maybe, again, look to manage over this period. James Milner is a prime candidate typically to come in. We never see James Milner injured. He's out with a hamstring injury. We've seen Alexander-Arnold missing. There are maybe question marks over Alisson. He's had a couple of injuries as well. Then you look, we've got Joel Matip. We already know with Joe Gomez and Van Dijk. Therefore, that central pairing, with the best will in the world, maybe Nico Williams' time will come, but it's just a little bit too soon. So, Fabinho and Joel Matip are the two players that you really need to keep fit. Those one loss of those players, and you may be dropping Henderson in there, but then you're missing something in midfield, and it's all of these little things which are happening and which are not allowing maybe Jurgen Klopp to do the things that he wants, not to have the training sessions that he wants to do, not being allowed to rest. We talked about how players after that pre-season program, once the season starts, players almost become deconditioned. Their fitness levels start to dip, especially with Liverpool. They've been playing 3 games a week for so long. So inherently, all that's happening now in training session, it's recovery work. It is light sessions. It's preparing for the next game. It's maintenance. There is no performance enhancing work being able to sort of build in around that. So if you're playing in a start 11, then, your levels are starting to dip. If you're not starting, if you're outside of that start 11, if you're not getting any game time at all, well, then, those players are dropping down even further. So some people mentioned against Fulham, and I haven't got the running stats to hand, but they didn't seem to press as high. The energy wasn't there. They didn't shift through the gears quite as quickly, and that could be reflected of that. You did, and on all of that, you've got the additional strain on those players who are fit because they're playing maybe slightly out of position, slightly different, tactical tweaks, and also on the back of a high number of minutes and a real high intensity style of play that Jurgen Klopp likes. Then factor that on what's happened for the last 2 years, then you start to understand why, Liverpool are maybe struggling at this moment just to sort of find top gear and put teams away as they have done really in the last 2 years. It takes a huge amount of effort in the Premier League. They just missed out against Manchester City, I think, was it by a point in 2018-19, and then of course they won the league last season. But it was about this again. It's this, they outrun their opponents, they outsprint their opponents, and sometimes psychologically and physically, their body just isn't able to tolerate those demands, and it comes to a point where you do start breaking a little bit. And then, of course, you've got bad luck, combined with that as well. Football is a contact sport, and there are going to be tackles, there are going to be contact issues. I mean, the Jota one didn't look much at all. That was a contact injury. You could have looked at that and went, was it a dead leg? Is it his PCL? Is it his MCL? It looks pretty innocuous. Walks off, didn't look in too much pain. And now we find out, it's nearly 2 months, possibly on the sidelines. So, things like that certainly don't help.
Yeah, and I said that I was going to analyse the data, and I've looked at this, and actually it makes for worrying reading. So looking at the home data of Liverpool, fantastic as always. The second best XG conceded, not many big chances conceded, goal attempts in the box conceded, not too many. They're looking good there, and going forward as well, XG non-penalty of the side at home is the best. XG of the side at home is the best. Chances created best. All this data is pretty fantastic. Most big chances, most shots in the box. Need I say more? But then you look at the away data of the side, and Liverpool haven't won in 5 away games in a row now. I think that's the first time since 2015 or 16. 5 years ago. They haven't kept a clean sheet on the road since game week 2's game against Chelsea. But what I looked at as well was actually their attacking data away from home is about mid-table or a bit higher. Looking at the data from these away games, they sit 10th for chances created, 9th for shots in the box, and 7th for XG non-penalty in all away games. Let's factor that in. It's an away game. But what shocks me most is actually the Liverpool team have the 3rd worst XG conceded away from home. This is really not good. Only Leeds and West Brom have fared worse on the road this season. They've allowed the 2nd most big chances, and with 12 goals conceded, they sit 17th for defensive prowess when they're not at Anfield. So, as a Robertson owner, this does add a little bit of worry when we factor in that Joel Matip might be missing. I would have been kind of all right if Joel Matip was okay and then Gomez comes back into the side and then Fabinho, Gomez were okay. But now that Matip might not be there and it's Henderson, and then if Henderson gets injured, who else is going to fill in there? It's not looking good, and I do worry a little bit. They can probably still maintain some form with home performances, but Tsimikas is now injured, so Robertson is not going to get rested. Nico Williams has been okay, but not great. In certain games, you used your great description of his qualities, but yeah, it's quite worrying. That back line there has been really, really hit by injuries this season, and obviously, this is no criticism of Klopp or the tactics of the team in terms of their ability to get results, because in fact they're doing a fantastic job of being such a consistently good side, still sitting second with so many injuries. But looking at this underlying data, especially away from home, maybe the tactic is kind of like the tradition with FPL, but away from home, maybe we shouldn't be looking to captain Salah, even if the fixture looks good, because they're just not doing that well. And, in the past, I've always been one to kind of go, you shouldn't fixate too much on home and away form. But then this was Liverpool and Man City's prime when it really didn't matter if they're home or away. But with the way COVID has hit and certain things like that, we're now seeing, differences in levels of performances. And I think, that the fact that the third worst XG conceded away from home is a really worrying bit of data for me. I'm still happy to own Robertson because, like I've explained before, he'll get that creative involvement. He's more like another midfielder in my side. He's basically like a 7 million midfielder with the ability to get clean sheets. So I'm happy with him, and he's had a great season, even with these kind of worrying underlying bits of data. But looking at other Liverpool ownerships, and it will mean that you have to consider in these away games. I mean, you don't own Salah, you don't own any of the Liverpool big hitters, but is that something that would play in the back of your mind now, knowing how poor Liverpool have been away from home?
I mean, the issue that I've always had with owning Liverpool assets, other than the ownership and numbers, was just what I've seen is an astronomical transfer. The cost value. I couldn't justify. I kind of get my head in that mindset of bringing in a 7 million defender, and whatever Trent was at the start of the season, maybe 7.3 or 7.5. I was just blown away with that, and to an extent, I'm quite happy with that decision. But these are premium players, for a reason, and that on any given day they're capable of producing both attacking, defensive and offensive returns. So you're always running that risk if you don't own them. For me, in the situation that Liverpool were in, and maybe why they're not hitting those levels of before, we heard from Marcelo Bielsa today, and what the data is telling us at the moment is against Leeds United, teams are running more, pressing more, and have greater distance at high intensity sprints than they do against any other opponent. So, against Leeds, people seem to be, having a set game, having a game plan set, knowing that Leeds are going to try to dominate, going to try to have the possession, are going to try to outrun you. It's a very similar mindset with Liverpool. You're coming up with the champions, so what you want is, you want that scalp, you want that 3 points, you want that feather in your cap. So you raise your game, psychologically, you want to be up there, because if you can go out and you can claim that you've beat, one of the best teams, not just in Premier League in Europe, but one of the best teams in the world, then that's something to sort of shout about. And so the Liverpool of last season is even, you need to surpass those levels because teams are trying even harder. And that's what made, Manchester City such a great team for all those seasons, because they were able to put in those levels of performances, week in and week out. And maybe, Liverpool are just having this slight wobble. They're creaking under the pressure a little bit. And, it's about managing that. And again, there's going to be confidence plays a big part in it as well, because, Liverpool will not be going out on that field now and thinking, well, actually, we're not this big juggernaut that we have been in the past, and we're going to have to learn to grind out results. And they showed against Fulham. You cannot switch off in the Premier League for 15, 20, first 30 minutes. Potentially that the game could have been lost at that point. Because they're all in that top flight for a reason. They're all, Fulham have got some decent form, so they mightn't be as lucky next time. And have Liverpool got the personnel who are fit amongst the ranks at this precise moment, to be able to, deal with this kind of situation and still bring home, the bacon and get those points on the board.
Well, this is something that I said to you off air, again, maybe filled with a bit more expletives when I messaged you. But I said to you, what are they going to do against Tottenham? Because Tottenham have been in such good form. And this is the exact point that Mourinho will know how to play against them. He'll know these weaknesses and he will exploit it. And it does mean that a game where previously I would have thought Tottenham had no chance. Come on, this is Liverpool we're talking about. Now all of a sudden, as an Arsenal fan, I'm worried. As a Liverpool asset owner, I'm worried. I'm just worried all over. But there is the chance, obviously, that both teams will go into this and score. But there's also the equal likelihood that, Mourinho will go, as long as we don't lose, this will be all right. There's a lot of kind of different outcomes that there could be with this because Tottenham, have got the title in their sights. They're sitting top, sitting pretty. And if they go into Christmas period, top of the table, they'll fancy themselves. And Mourinho will have that in his mind for the psychology. And maybe he won't want to risk this Liverpool game, but this is the weakest Liverpool have been for quite a few seasons. This is the kind of thing that Mourinho will want to win to kind of prove to the players, look, you believed in me and now you're getting the result. So maybe he'll go for it. I really don't know. That one's such a hard one to call. But talking of Liverpool high ownership data, we always have to have a weekly check-in of how differential is your team, Ben. Can you give us a little update? And also, I wax lyrical about my gran. It's Christmas time. We're having a great old time, and I love her to bits. But she's embarrassing me on FPL at the moment. The last couple of weeks, she has got some mad scores. Last week, she got 87 points. This week, she got 66 points. I mean, I said to her this week, you should be coming on the podcast instead of me because literally almost all the players that she had in her team got, some sort of output. The only ones that didn't were De Bruyne, Ward-Prowse and Grealish. Everybody else got a goal or an assist and, I'm shocked. But she picks players because they have nice faces. She'll go, oh, he looks like a good lad. He's got a decent haircut. He's not got one of those silly haircuts. So that kind of, maybe we need to factor in Gran kind of thinking into this. She said, oh, I like Cresswell. He's got a nice, decent haircut. He looks like a good lad. He's probably very nice to his own Gran. That's her mentality. But what about your differentialness? What kind of level are you at, Ben?
Read it. See, it was climbing. I think it hit around 24-25% at one point, and that was mainly due to Harry Kane, Chilwell and Martinez, who's sitting on my bench at the moment. I managed to do some tinkering, some little tweaks, and I brought it right back down again. I'm actually down to 12% at this moment. So
that is delicious.
I got a lot of messages this game week because a lot of the big hitters missed out. So without even looking at my team, they were like, Ben, you must have done well. Your differential team must have done okay. I fell at that abyss. I'm not on the premiums, which is great, but I'm not on anybody else who actually manages to have any points either. So I don't actually know what I've got in my team. It was disappointing me, but I'm happy with 12%. And like I say, there's three players inherently who are really flying that flag 12%. If I was to get rid of one of those, certainly Martinez, who's he's on, and if you haven't been watching or listening This isn't an FPL head choice. This is the heart that is absolutely raging with Martinez because I cannot seem to get my goalkeeping situation right. It's cost us a hell of a lot of points. I flip-flop between Leno and Martinez. And the one time that I went Leno over Martinez at Emirates, and obviously Villa got the result, and I think that was it. I was just spewing.
Oh no, you're not telling me that you put Leno this week instead of Martinez?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. I mean,
oh, I feel that one here. That's actually hurt me a little bit. Oh,
so do you know what? I kind of be too angry. I kind of be too disappointed because I said Martinez would never play for me again. So I never entertained the notion of actually starting him. But it hurts when you're watching the game and I was willing. I just brought in Neto. I was willing him to score, and he brightened up in that second half at Pordens, and then Neto. I think did he do the? He crossed the ball for Den Donker, and it was a Den Donker volley from about 7 or 8 yards, and you're just thinking that's got to, you've got to bust the net with that. And Martinez obviously pulled off the save, and you knew. And the other disappointing one was Bertrand again. But I looked at that back line. I had 3 out of 4 returners in that back line, and if I had started him, it probably would have been at the expense of a City defender. So, if the truth be told, only Chilwell was the only one in the back line who didn't return.
And just quickly before we continue the conversation, Anand has said, have I missed a lot? He's just joined. You have missed a lot, Anand, but it's all right because we upload these onto YouTube. So you still got time to ask us a few questions. We'll be ending very soon, though. But you can always check it out. Put Ben Dinnery into YouTube. It will go straight to the Premier Injuries YouTube channel where we put up all the videos for you to enjoy, because we understand that people might not be able to watch live, but it's always the best way to get involved. Now, you mentioned there obviously Aston Villa, and I think one of the things that the community will really have to keep an eye on is when those double game weeks are announced. But just to go on another little bit of an FPL rant, but why the hell was Jack Grealish not taking penalties in that game? I was all right with Wolves conceding and Neto not doing anything because he wasn't even on my pitch in my team this game week, because I thought, well, logically Villa will do well. Then I was so worried because I thought, well, actually Neto might do something here because Wolves were the better side. Looking at XG, looking at data, they should have walked away with at least a point in that game, probably the 3. And then I thought, joy of joys, we've got a penalty here. Watkins is not on them anymore. And then who do I bloody see walking up but El Ghazi? I mean, of all the people, Jesus.
I mean, I must admit, I was watching the game, and once Villa were awarded that penalty, my heart sank because I knew just how high his ownership was, Grealish. To see El Ghazi stand up, and I was over the moon with that. And I listened to Dean Smith's post-match comments. I don't know if you did hear those with regards to those decision over the penalty taker. But apparently it was always going to be El Ghazi. As long as he's on the pitch, he is penalty taker. If he isn't on the pitch, then it's Jack.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me, But then, obviously, I own Jack Grealish, so I'm going to be a little bit kind of biased towards him. But just it doesn't make sense for me that you're relying on somebody that hasn't started all season for your penalty taking. You should have the person that's on your pitch, week in, week out, and that's Grealish. But, of course, I own Grealish, so I'm going to say that. But realistically, that just makes more logical sense to me. You want your kind of consistent starter out there so that they do get regular penalty takes anyway. And, they say that El Ghazi takes the penalties all the time in training. That's training. These are high-profile situations. And the fact that they almost gambled it on El Ghazi for this game week. 3 points were on the line. I just didn't understand it. And just quickly for Anand, I'm going to put in the group chat here the link to our YouTube channel, because, share it with your friends. Watch this back, because we've had quite a few good chats. But he's asked about, have Mahrez, Rashford, Bruno, KDB, Grealish, Watkins and Bamford Ings. I like that team. Who do I bench from the aforementioned players? Now that is the $1 million question. Just from initial thoughts, I'd say Rashford. I think that he's not looked good. The only problem is obviously Mahrez with the Pep roulette wheel, but he's probably the least productive out of all of them. If I remember off the top of my head, obviously Bruno has had great kind of XGI kind of involvement. Watkins, Bamford and Ings are looking good. Ings, obviously, we can't count his XGI and stuff, but the last 2 game weeks, he's come back from a long-term injury and he's had a goal and assist. He's great. Bamford is the one that we love to hate, but he's still in a really good Leeds team. Interesting fact for you, Arsenal and Leeds are the 2 most underperforming teams on XG this season. Wonder why? One team is obviously playing really badly. The other team has a really bad striker who doesn't put away all these amazing chances. But the thing is, Bamford will get these chances. And Watkins is in a fairly good Villa side, hopefully with Barkley coming back. Grealish, he's the talisman. KDB is basically the talisman. Bruno's the talisman. And Mahrez, I would say, is the better player in a better Manchester outfit. But it's very, very close. And it's a great question to have, because it's super hard. And I wouldn't like you to make the decision just on my point of view, Anand, because it could go either way. Man United have looked improved, so have Man City, especially with the underlying data. They're both good ones to have. Would you disagree with any of that? Would you maybe bench Watkins, Ben, and have Rashford in the side?
I've been hugely disappointed with Rashford in recent game weeks. I felt as if he's got out of jail twice in 2 of the last 3 with a couple of assists. And even in the Manchester derby, I thought he had done it again with the penalty that was initially awarded for the foul by Kyle Walker in the box before it was overruled because he had been flagged offside. He's not great. We need him to replicate maybe some of that form, slightly improved form in the Champions League. At least he's getting on the score sheet to the Premier League. He isn't looking great. More frustratingly for me, the fact that he's made captain. Watkins as well. I still find it hard. As good as Leeds' underlying stats are, the overriding feeling there is Bamford is just so bad. I just cannot get off that fact. I cannot get my FPL head out of the eye test, and no matter what the stats are telling us, I cannot go there with Bamford. It's just, I watched him again and I just think he gets a penalty and you'd look at it and go, I think he's done quite well. Sloppy defending from West Ham. But, there were a few occasions there that he should have done a lot better. As with Haller, Haller, 2 strikers who I wouldn't be having anywhere near my team at this moment in time. And the Mahrez one, I agree. I do. I like Mahrez, but again, he's not a player to ever have in my team because I think he's always on the cusp of that 11. You're not sure whether he's quite in or out. Was it this season? I think he started the first 4 games in all competitions, which was unbelievable. And then he disappears, and then he drops out. I think it was either the 5th or the 6th game where he was omitted from the match day squad altogether. And it's just like, has he picked up an injury? No, he's absolutely fine. So you start him for 4 weeks, and then he just disappears altogether, and it he's frustrating Pep, and given the strength and depth, particularly in those attacking thirds, City can afford to do that, and for that reason, I wouldn't be prepared to put the outlay on Mahrez at that price point, knowing that he's not a nailed down starter.
The only kind of positives that I can get from both Mahrez and Rashford, and this goes for all Man City and Manchester United assets, is the fact that those two teams have the two best fixtures over the next 6 game weeks, and that is an attractive prospect. But again, even with good games, both sides haven't done amazingly well. The only kind of time that Man City have turned up to their old levels was that Burnley game where they smashed them 5. Manchester United, have been inconsistent. And as you said, Rashford has been relatively quiet. He's been involved with 2.93 XGI in the last 6 games, but even then he's looked fairly anonymous. And it's this form over fixtures kind of debate there. And on this occasion, I'd probably say KDB's fine to own. Maybe one of the Man United defenders. Fernandes is obviously fantastic. Diaz, Cancelo. But apart from that, I wouldn't be kind of loading up on either of the team's assets. It's, Chelsea probably better defence. Tottenham have the, probably 2 best must-own players in terms of Son and Kane. There's a lot of kind of other players out there that are really making it hard. But then, as Anand said, Rashford is playing Sheffield United next, the worst team in the league so far. So it's really difficult, really, really difficult. And this is why I give advice, but I wouldn't like to say who you should or shouldn't have in your team, because anything and everything is happening at the moment. And the fact that only 2 games so far this season have matched up with their XG data as well just shows you that there's real inconsistency with team qualities as well. One of the final points that I wanted to say, again, looking back to a few weeks ago, my suggestion of Burnley assets, well, now they've got 3 clean sheets in the last 5 games, really high quality defensive performances, and that 1-0 win against Arsenal, Pope, Loughton and me all walk away with bonus points. Next few games have some real cleanable ones. I think them and Eric Dyer like the cheap defensive assets that I think people need to get in over this festive period, just to bump out your squad. And I'm happy to play them, over the next few game weeks. I mean, next game week is for Burnley is a more difficult one against Aston Villa, but we know what they can be like. Wolves, Leeds, Sheffield United, Fulham, these are all pretty nice fixtures. So I think that's the kind of concluding point that I want to make there. And just a thanks to Anand as well joining in. And please share, the YouTube link, because obviously you'll be rewatching it and it'll be out later tonight. I'll try and get it out as soon as possible for you so that you can watch tomorrow. But share with your friends, get people involved, get people tuning in to the HotMic live event as well, or at least commenting on our YouTube videos. But is there anything else that you wanted to add, Ben, before we wrap up?
No, mate. Look, it's. I think you've covered some of the key talking points heading into game week 13. Look, it's going to be tough. We know there are going to be a few surprises in there, with this quick turnaround. Don't get too disheartened, if it doesn't go your way this midweek. Week 12 is still a little bit raw for me. I'm going to attack week 13 with renewed vigor from tomorrow morning. It's a new game week is upon us, and anything can happen. We've seen that. We've seen some great returns. And I take inspiration from FPL Gran McKenna. Look, she's my inspiration. If I can get anywhere near Gran's FPL team, over this festive period, then I'll be very, very happy with that. Yeah. Because I'm sinking slowly.
Maybe she needs to lend you the turkey baster just so that you can get some of that water out of the boat. Number 13, lucky for some, unlucky for many. I totally agree with that. I'm a little bit superstitious over that one, but then I've had such bad luck over the last few game weeks. I think 13, we'll push that aside. We'll see it as 14 minus 1 because I think this could be a good game week for me. Again, I've said it quite a few game weeks. I like my assets. I don't really see anything too much wrong with them. But and very kind comment to say that this is your favourite podcast. It's very kind. And he said he'll bench Mahrez on that note. Fascinating.
Oh.
This is squeaky bum time. This is prime Alex Ferguson. I hope that you don't tune in because we'll be live as well Thursday. So you can tune in then for the live, or we'll get out the video, of course. But we hope that you won't be back on Thursday to say, you guys ruined my team and everything like that. We wish you the best of luck as well, Anand. And for everybody else listening, please do get involved with the live events because I know you'll be listening over YouTube. But this is the prime area on HotMic because you can send questions to us. You can have your questions answered like Anand. But from me, for tonight, we're going to say goodbye, Ben.
And thank you, Jason, and thank you, Anand. Great to see you in the chat box. Yes, so we are back on Thursday night, usual time, 8:30. We will then be looking ahead to Gear Week 14. But for now, good luck. I hope it's a green arrow all around. Look, green arrows for everyone. It's Christmas, so why not? Speak to you all again soon. See you then.